Tech Sounds presents EduTrends.
Welcome to EduTrends, presented by the Institute for the Future of Education. This is a Tech Sound podcast, the official podcast of Tecnológico de Monterrey. I am José Pepe Escamilla, and I am Associate Director of the Institute for the Future of Education. Today's guest is Dr. Mari Burns, a renowned specialist in educational technology from Brookings Institution. It's a pleasure to have you here, Mari.
Igualmente. Thank you, Jorge, for inviting me.
You're welcome. I want to ask you first more like a personal question. What sparked your passion for education, and what made you decide to dedicate a great part of your life to it?
Sure. And sorry, apologies. I said Jorge. Thank you for inviting me. Sure. I got into teaching about 40 years ago, purely accidentally, and found out that I actually loved it. In 1997, I started working in the area of educational technology. Technology was fairly new in American schools, and it was being used as a tool for transformation. And I actually saw a tremendous benefit in terms of the potential of technology. And I also saw a tremendous benefit in working with teachers. If you work with a teacher, you work with hundreds of kids. And if you work at a systemic level, you work with thousands of kids. So since 1997, I've been involved in educational technology at every single level of the system, from working directly with kids in the classroom to teaching at universities like the Tecnológico de Monterrey in Mexico City, to writing national technology plans, to doing research, evaluation, setting up programs. And since 2022, I have been involved, like everyone else, in the area of artificial intelligence. I'm currently leading a study for the Brookings Institution on the effects of AI in education. Before that, I was working at a university in Portugal, actually helping my colleagues in the faculty actually learn about and integrate AI. And I've done quite a bit of writing and research on AI, and I've used it myself actually quite extensively in my own work.
Thank you, Mari. Very, very interesting work and career. I will say very important career. Congratulations. And you were recently at Tecnológico Monterrey in a meeting organized by UNESCO and the Graduate School of Education from Tec de Monterrey. And you presented some work that you are doing around AI in education. What can you tell us about that work?
Sure. Yeah, so I've been, as I said, leading a study for the Brookings Institution on AI in education. I'm a consultant for Brookings. I am a long-term consultant, but I don't work there. So we're actually looking at, what are the potential risks of AI? And more importantly, what can we do to address these risks now so that we can actually so that people can actually really harness the benefits of technology. I mean, we know from the history of technology through people like Marshall McLuhan, Neil Postman, Nicholas Carr, Alvin Kratzberg, that every technology, every innovation really has both benefits and it has risks. Some of the risks we know about, the known knowns, and some of the risks we don't know. So the example I like to give is, who knew in the 1990s and 1995, when we had Netscape, that 25 years later, or 35 years later, Netscape would have launched a digital nomad program that sends people all over the world, where people are working all over the world, in cities that they don't necessarily reside in, like Lisbon or Madrid, et cetera, that the invention of the internet would actually impact housing prices, that it would impact the culture and the linguistic makeup of cities, that it would contribute to over tourism and kind of this ethnic homogenization. I mean, the kind of stuff you're seeing in Mexico City and Roma, with all the Americans who can come and work via the internet. So I think that's kind of what we'd mean by an unknown unknown. We were thinking in the 1990s, okay, the internet can lead to cheating and laziness and et cetera. But there are just other things that we could never imagine happening. So this is the kind of thing that we're looking for in this study.
Right. Yes. I also, it's not only Americans. I remember the same thing is happening in Aguascalientes in Mexico, and last week I was in Medellin. It's the same thing that is happening. People say that a lot of people from Chile, for instance, are moving to Medellin because housing and quality of life are great, no, and it's less expensive. So it's an unanticipated consequence of technology.
Right.
And
Exactly.
mhm. And by the way, those are great books that you have mentioned also. And I think that people should read them. Uh, s- about AI, not as the tools become more prevalent. What are your point of view on the role of the teacher? No, so we have been talking for 20 years or more that the teacher's role has to change, not to be more student centered, to be more the creator of learning scenarios than teaching, etc. So, do you think these tools now will make a reality these changes? And also, what are the biggest myths or estimations about AI and what AI can do in
Um,
the cloud?
sure. So those are two questions, and I'll take each one separately. I mean, I think from what I've seen, both in my own experience and teachers that I interviewed before the Brookings Project, not only was I working at a university using AI for my own instructional design, I design online courses and teaching faculty and teachers how to use AI. But I was also interviewing teachers around the world about their experiences with technology, and AI was just beginning. So, if I had to do this crudely, I would say that I think for about a third of the world's teachers, this is very crude. Um, is AI changing the role of the teacher to more of a guide and facilitator? Absolutely, yes. For another third of the world, is AI uh, changing teaching? No, because a lot of teachers are going back to very traditional pencil and paper lecture based practices because they're not sure how to manage AI. And then I think, for other teachers, it may be another third, it's kind of a mixed bag. And in terms of how it's changing teaching, I do think it's changing it profoundly for a lot of teachers. I think number one is that teaching is being hybridized. You have teachers working with kids and AI working with kids, and teachers working with AI to work with kids. A lot of that is complementary, a lot of it is supplementary, but a lot of it is sometimes AI replacing the teacher, or in some cases, the teacher replacing AI. Um, I think teachers are becoming more and more because these technology companies are releasing tools to on schools that aren't completely fit for purpose or aren't completely baked, if you will, cocinado, then teachers actually have this intermediary role. And so I think one of their intermediary roles is intermediary role. What I mean is kind of negotiating the weaknesses of AI and the threats of AI with what their students need. And I think another one of these, besides the hybridization, is kind of teachers are becoming like what I say, the interpreters of maladies. In other words, they're becoming intermediaries between AI's hallucinations and biases and a student's interpretation of truth. They're becoming um, in intermediaries between students' emotional struggles and their dependence on especially companion AI bots. And they are intermediaries between parents who confront teachers because ChatGPT gave their kid a better grade than the teacher did. I think the role of teacher is changing and that they're becoming ethical stewards. They're ensuring that AI use respects human agency and dignity and autonomy. I think they're becoming detectives and forensic specialists. As much as we don't want to say this, kids are using AI. Many kids are using AI to cheat, so teachers are investigating the authenticity and authorship of student work. In some ways, they're becoming AI's amanuensis, and potentially their surrogates, especially when they take the outputs of AI and don't interrogate them or evaluate them or supervise them themselves. And then I think teachers, like students, have become AI's guinea pigs. They are free, teachers are free labor for technology companies who, rather than fixing their products and making them whole, push them out onto the education community, almost in beta form sometimes, and expect teachers to kind of clean up this mess. So I'm just going to say this before I move on to the next question. I have been involved in the ed tech world for almost 30 years. I have never seen such pressure on teachers, on schools to use tools such as these. And OpenAI and Anthropic and Google, they're not creating these products to help teachers. They're creating these products to make extraordinary amounts of money. So in terms of the biggest myths of AI, the or overestimation, I think you asked, that this idea that AI will transform education and kind of solve all of its problems. And we have heard that for 100 years. The TV was supposed to transform education. Radio was supposed to transform education. The internet was supposed to transform education. Um, Technology alone does not transform education. It has to be part of systemic reforms. And law, healthcare, and education are very hard to transform because they're place-based and they involve a great deal of human-to-human interaction. I think the second myth along these lines is that AI will improve learning. And again, we've been sold on this myth for the last 4 decades. We just don't have any large, conclusive, rigorous body study that shows that that technology writ large improves learning. We do know that certain education tools, when designed well, when embedded in research-proven pedagogy, when using high quality content and materials with certain groups, actually can improve learning. But whole cloth, that's simply not true. In terms of AI, large language models that many of our students are using, they're not improving learning, they're actually replacing learning. And we can talk a lot about this. I think the third myth is that AI is a teacher's best friend. And sure, it's an extraordinary productivity tool, but I think it only really saves you time if you take its outputs and don't do anything with them, if you accept them wholesale. I think another myth is that technology is pedagogy, that ipso facto, being innovative means using AI, good teaching means using AI, good teachers use AI, quality learning involves AI, and we know that that's simply not true. There's a lot of really bad uses of technology. There's a really lot of badly designed AI platforms that are very behaviorist, kind of old wine and new bottles. And I think I'll just finish with the last myth, which I think is that AI won't replace teachers. And I wish this were not true, but I do believe that AI will replace teachers in many education systems. In my country, in Mexico, private education systems that are for-profit institutions that want to make money. The best way to make money is to reduce your costs. The best way to reduce your costs in education is to reduce the costs of labor, which involves teachers. I think we will see AI used to replace teachers in those contexts and also in places like Sub-Saharan Africa or South Asia where there's severe, severe teaching shortages and it simply costs too much money to recruit and train and support and keep supporting teachers. So I'll stop there because that's long answers to 2 questions.
It's a very good answer. Very long, interesting. There's a lot to.
Long-winded answers to 2 questions.
I wanted to go back to some of the things that you said. Many things that I would like to ask you, but we will not have a lot of time. So I will start with these students over relying on AI. It's also known as cognitive offloading. So what are the risks there, and how do you think we can or should proceed to mitigate those risks or to reduce those risks? Or for sure, there's 1/3 that are going back to traditional paper and pencil, but is that the only solution, or are there other possibilities?
No, I don't think there's one solution. No, so the risk for in terms of cognitive offloading for your audience that may not be familiar with that term, I mean, that's just basically, essentially at its core, getting AI to do the work that the human brain would do. And we have a long history of offloading with technology. We use calculators. My phone is full of friends and family's phone numbers because I can't memorize them anymore. So I would say there's a spectrum of offloading, using a spell checker to check your spelling in a document instead of looking it up manual in a dictionary or memorizing spelling words. I mean, that might be a limited example of offloading. The danger of AI and large language models in particular is they're thinking machines, or they seem to be thinking machines. They're actually probability machines, but they are very good at doing the thinking for you. This is not just me saying this. This is OpenAI and Anthropic. I mean, both of them this year have released documents. One of them is OpenAI's system card that talks about the dangers of um, students subsuming their higher level thinking to ChatGPT, and the Anthropic in the spring published a study of how university students in the United States are using AI. They are using it for analyzing, synthesizing, creativity, and evaluation. These are higher level thinking skills. AI excels at higher level thinking. So, I mean, the dangers here are multiple. They're physiological. We can see changes in the brain. I mean, I've read studies that talk about concerns that this is not proven, but concerns that without that kind of cognitive friction and that kind of cognitive workout that like exercise you do at the gym, except with your brain, that that we could all potentially be at a risk of higher levels of, let's say, dementia. Um, if that sounds odd to you, I suggest to your audience to look at the London cabbie study between cabbies that use a GPS system and cabbies that memorize the street system in London. They found that the cabbies who memorize the street system have bigger hippocampuses and less incidence of dementia. So, I mean, so there's those kind of changes, but the big thing is that we just simply won't learn, or we won't want to learn. So the offloading really erodes not just our ability to learn, our ability to memorize, our ability to think critically, to read, to write, to argue, but also our desire to do that. That's the big thing. So, how do we address it? I think we have to address it in a number of ways, and I think some of the technology companies are doing that. So, there's Claude for Education. There's, I think it's called Study Together, OpenAI, Conmigo. These are platforms that rather than giving you the answer, they actually scaffold reasoning and thinking with their users. In this case, it's supposed to be students. I think there's a number of things, cognitive force functioning, progressive disclosure, like we do in online learning, where you don't give out the whole answer. You just give out parts of the answer. Um, I think a simple thing that could be done, if you've used Claude versus ChatGPT, you'll notice in ChatGPT, it's always offering to do more for you because it's sycophantic. It wants to please you. If you took away that last line of code that simply says, "Can I do this for you? Can I do that for you? Can I take this and turn it into a document for you?" Claude doesn't do that. I think that would go a long way toward cognitive offloading. I think teachers have to design activities that really impede the tendency to offload cognitively, and that's easier said than done. It's not as simple as the learner-centered versus teacher-centered dyad. The classrooms I've been in where they're preventing offloading most effectively are very traditional classrooms where the teacher talks, the student takes notes by hand, there is no technology, everything's written or oral. I don't know we want a steady diet of that for our students, but I've also been in classrooms and talked to teachers where they are doing problem-based learning, they are doing project-based learning, and the kids are still using AI to come up with responses. I've talked to educators who say we have to personalize everything and it has to be about them and their experiences, but that's not realistic. That is realistic in many systems. That is not realistic in other systems. Um, And I think we have to teach kids strategies and teach ourselves as adults. I struggle with cognitive offloading all the time. So I think we need strategies where we really, work on promoting um, our own agency around this technology.
Thank you for your answer. Very, very interesting. And when you sum the different benefits and risks of AI in education, I see that there are many risks and little benefits. So what I know that you're a techno optimist as me because you've been working on this for a while.
I'm a
But
techno realist.
even if you don't, yes, but let's say realist, but also looking at the possibilities now of these technologies and education. We've been doing this for a long time,
Yeah.
and what do you think that the drawbacks or risk outweigh the benefits of AI in education and learning?
So let me go back. So number one is, I mean, thank you for pointing that out because we've had conversations. Yeah, I believe that um, I don't think you should not have AI in schools. I think you really need to be extremely careful about how it's rolled out and used and how kids are prepared to use it because this technology is not like anything else we've had before. Usually, technology is circumscribed by menus. This is activated by your voice. You can talk to it in natural language and it creates things for you. AI is in the workplace, and I strongly believe that students should be learning to use technology for no other reason, at a minimum, because they will encounter it in the workplace. So, um, I think that is number one. Number two is it's very hard to determine what the real risks and benefits of a tool that is and platforms that is so new are. So it's been 3 years. It'll be 3 years next month since OpenAI launched ChatGPT 3, which was kind of the large scale release of these models. I mean, they'd existed before, but they hadn't been used in schools really, and they hadn't been used at scale. 3 years is nothing in the lifespan of educational technology research. I mean, as you know, it takes a long time. There's always a lag between what we know about technology and the use of technology. We have great data now on TV for learning and radio for learning and more about internet for learning because we have 100 years, uh, another 100 years, 50, 80 years, and about 40 years now worth of data that we can look at. So we don't have enough. So oftentimes, including when I talk, there's these presumptions of causation. Um, and we just don't know yet for sure. Now, having said that, this study, I'm sent to look for problems, um, but I was very concerned about AI and its effects on children, not on trained adults or scientists or university professors, but on kids. I was worried about it 2 years before I even came onto this study. And, there are benefits. I mean, we do know we have some pretty good data that starts before generative AI, that intelligent tutoring systems, which typically use predictive AI and kind of classic AI, um, that there's really good data behind those tools. Again, those are old technologies. Those are decades old. I mean, we have some pretty good data on the impacts of personalization. We know that AI is a pretty amazing productivity tool. So, and we know that AI excites kids, and we know what the possibilities of AI are. So, this is some stuff that we do know. Um, but we also know other things that I think right now are we got to get a handle on these because they're disturbing. We know that there is a fairly strong relationship between using AI and cognitive offloading and dependence and decline in cognitive functioning. We know that. Some of the best work that I've seen that's coming out of there is Michael Gerlich, who's at the Swiss Business School. Um, we know that kids are getting addicted to these companion bots, and we know that these companion bots are designed to promote engagement and addiction, and we know that the more kids use them, the lonelier they feel. We know some of this from Jean Twang's work on social media, but we know some of this increasingly from documentation. So we need more research. We absolutely need more research on AI's impacts on kids. Um, but I would say right now, my concerns exceed my pessimism exceeds my level of optimism in terms of using AI for kids, 13 to 17-year-olds, anyone under 17. Um, but I don't think that that doesn't mean that we don't use it. I think that means we use it in very structured and scaffolded ways. I think it means we prepare kids to use AI. We might need age verification systems to use AI. I think we have kids use it with a lot of supervision. I think we do a lot of work with them on AI literacy, especially around metacognition and self-regulation and self-directedness. So another long answer, Pepe, to a very simple
No, no,
question.
it's a reality is nuance. It's not very very easy to explain. It's complex. So as I'm listening to you, and I'm I don't know, I'm a professor or a head of department or a principal or a dean, a president of university, a minister of education. So I think, wow, this is a lot. So what do I have to do to prepare my teacher, my professors to work with AI?
I think the first thing I would say that people in charge right now, they really have to educate themselves. I used to never say this because my philosophy, having worked with ministries of education and ministers of education, I would say, look, their job is not to know about, the internet or social media or this, adaptive learning program. But now I think we all need to know about AI because in some ways it is, the threats can be existential without going too far down the doomer road. So I think people need to educate themselves. I think, you know, governments, universities really have to plan for AI. It's extraordinary to me the lack of planning that I have seen around AI, both where I've worked in the institutions I work with, but especially among teachers and educators in school districts who I'm talking to. There's very little planning, and I think this involves a tremendous amount of planning. And I think the biggest thing we can be doing is really educating people, parents, kids, teachers, university teachers, everyone, not just how to use the tools. A lot of places I've gone to say, "Oh, we have AI literacy," and when I dig a little deeper, AI literacy means how do I use this set of tools? How do I use, Google LM? How do I use this particular tool? I think we have to help people understand, look, what are the benefits and risks of these tools? What are ethical and unethical uses? How do I use these tools in ways that are ethical and responsible and transparent? Um, how do I titrate the use? How do I use AI not too much or not too little, but kind of just right? I think this idea of how do I blend and balance AI in my instruction? How do I use AI so that it augments learning, not substitutes for learning or automates learning? Because one of the great ironies I'm finding in this research is I talk to people who say, look, kids need to use AI because they need these skills, critical thinking, persistence. They need to be ethical. They need to be curious. They need to think in diverse ways. And on the flip side of that, in our research, these are the very skills that overuse of AI is actually eroding. So in other words, the very rationale for using AI is those skills in many cases are being eroded by AI. Um, so I'll stop there.
Yes, and also those are the most important skills that you need to be a good user of AI. No, it's a
Yeah,
paradox that
yeah, exactly that. And I'll just I think the one big thing is it's become very clear again. We have to know content. I mean, teachers all of it. We teachers have to be masters of content. In some ways, we've gotten away from that over the years. I was a Latin teacher. I never took a Latin course, but I ended up teaching Latin for 2 years. I was learning along with my students. That happens in a lot of education systems. You have people who are teaching outside their content area. That is a recipe for disaster because AI is going to serve up responses that if you don't know your content area, and if kids don't know this content area, and they don't because they're young, they're learning it, that is just an absolute recipe for ignorance and misinformation and disinformation.
Yes. Oh, related to that, and another thing that you said about adaptive learning. So at Tec de Monterrey, we had an adaptive learning strategy that was in the process of being scaled. So we decided to keep that because it's more safe, and we have research that proves that it's better than um, doing without it, particularly for first level courses, because you have the opportunity of leveling students that have gaps that come from high school or previous learning experiences. And it has worked very well. And also, in the use of generative AI, we decided not to test. We don't even consider tools that are meant to be bypassing the professor. No, it's something that gives feedback or grading or things like that. It has to, and it bypasses the professor. We are not interested on that. Not at this moment. So we go into that direction so that professors have to take charge of what's happening. No? And what you say is very important. So we are arriving at the end of our talk today. Maria, I think there are many things left. We may schedule a next one soon, I hope. And I will end this conversation by asking you to look into the future. So I think it's going to be difficult because you said that it's very hard to understand how these tools go. No, so maybe instead of asking you how do you imagine higher education will evolve, maybe what is your desire? Do you desire one, and what can we do to create that future together? I don't know. I
For
give you
high
an open question. No.
in terms of higher education, what I would personally love to see, so I taught at the Tec de Monterrey, and what was so impressive to me, at least in the Mexico City campus, is that we were expected to use learner-centered approaches, and I fortunately had knew how to do that because I had before that been a teacher myself and kind of figured out that if you lecture to 11-year-olds, they're not going to listen to you, so you got to really make it active. And then I worked with teachers for a number of years. But I at the Tec de Monterrey, what I was so impressed by was we had to learn, use either project-based, problem-based, case-based learning or collaborative learning approaches, and the tech had professional development sessions for us. It is still I'm gonna go through my brain really quickly. I've been at 4 higher education institutions. Okay, yep, it's true. The tech is the only place, I have been, and really one of the few places that I know of in terms of tertiary level institutions where teaching is taken seriously. And in most institutions, even in teacher education colleges, research matters more than teaching. The incentive structure is all about doing research, which means that the disincentive structure is about good teaching. And I think that has to change, especially in the preparation of pre-service teachers. Um, they have got to learn about AI now. Teacher education colleges, I think, have historically been pretty poor globally. This is a gross generalization, but they haven't done a great job in terms of preparing teachers to use technology well in their teaching with primary and secondary school age students. And I think that has to change. I would love to see more linkages between higher education systems and the schools, especially again, these teacher education programs where pre-service teachers are graduating and going into schools. Um, I'd love to see teachers being at the tertiary level being rewarded for good teaching, the way they're kind of rewarded for education. So, and I think, yeah, we need some really, really practical utilization-focused research on the impacts of AI in education and what their particular effects are on students. And I hope, we have a pretty poor history as human beings of adopting technologies. We take shortcuts. We trade convenience and expediency for data privacy, and myself included. And, I just think I'd like to see more awareness, especially around AI, because as I said earlier, I think this is kind of we're talking about a different ball of wax here, a different type of technology that I think might have more profound implications than other technologies have had in the past.
That's a great. Thank you very much, Mary, for your insights
So thank you,
on the
Pepe.
future and lab teaching and learning with the AI. I like also this view of being careful. Not that we have had other podcasts in this series with very highly optimistic people that cannot see anything that is wrong with it. So I like that these nuances on things. I really enjoy this conversation, and I think we have to follow up soon.
Oh,
Thank
thank you
you.
very much. Thank you.
Very-
Thank you, Pepe. Pepe, not Jorge. Thank you so much. Muchas gracias.
Gracias. Bye.